The word lands in the room like a glass breaking. My husband is leaning back in his chair with a beer in his hand, surrounded by 4 of his friends in our backyard, and he laughs and says, "Let's be honest. Without me, she'd be worthless. Not struggling, not lost, worthless." The men around him go quiet in the way people go quiet when something ugly has happened but no one wants to be the one to name it. A half grin here, a look at the table there. Someone's beer bottle moves slowly from hand to hand. I am standing at the edge of the patio with a tray of food I just carried out from the kitchen. Food I spent the last 3 hours preparing for his guests because he told me this gathering was important to him. I'm still wearing the apron. There are oven marks on my wrists from leaning over the rack. For 1 full second I think I misheard him. Then he turns and looks directly at me. He is smirking, not embarrassed, not regretful, satisfied, the way someone looks when they have aimed at a target and felt the impact. He wants me to react. I understand that immediately. He wants this. The backyard goes quiet in a specific way. It is the silence of men who have witnessed a version of this before and made a collective quiet decision to look away. One of his friends, a man named Weston who my husband has known since college, picks up his drink and studies the label. Another one shifts in his seat. The youngest of the group, who I have met only twice before, glances at me quickly and then looks at the grass. None of them say anything. And I understand that too. This is the kind of moment that men like these navigate by doing nothing, because doing nothing is the safest thing. Agree and you've made an enemy of a wife who lives in your friend's house. Disagree and you've made an enemy of the friend who invited you over. So they go quiet and study their drinks and wait for it to pass. I am still holding the tray. Sliced bread and 3 kinds of cheese and the bruschetta I made from scratch because he had specifically mentioned it to one of them. Good food, hours of work, and I'm standing here holding it while he smirks at me. My hands don't shake. That is the thing that surprises me more than anything else, that the tray doesn't tip, that my grip doesn't loosen, that my hands remain entirely steady. I look at the tray for a second. Good food, hours of work, things I learned to make because he used to say he loved them. A bruschetta recipe I adapted over 2 years to match exactly what he liked, more garlic, less tomato, fresh basil at the last minute so it doesn't wilt. I think about all of that in the single breath I take before I do anything. Then I set the tray on the table. Not hard, not with any visible emotion. Just set it down, the way you set down something you've been carrying when you reach the place where it belongs. I step back. I look at my husband. He is still smirking, but the smirk has shifted slightly, not disappeared, just changed quality, become slightly less certain, because he expected something from me and what he got instead was exactly nothing. And nothing, in that specific moment, is somehow worse for him than anything I could have said. He doesn't know what to do with nothing. I need a minute, I say. He opens his mouth. I don't wait for whatever he's about to say. I turn and walk toward the back door of the house with the same even pace I used to walk outside with the tray. Not hurrying, not storming, just walking, the way you walk when you have somewhere to be and have already decided to go there. I hear him say something behind me, a short comment probably designed to reframe what just happened. I don't catch the words. I don't try to. The sliding door closes behind me. The kitchen is the same kitchen I spent 3 hours in today. The same counter where I chopped and arranged and tasted. The same stool in the corner where I sat between tasks because my back was bothering me and I needed 10 minutes off my feet. There's still a small pile of cutting board scraps on the counter, tomato skin, basil stems, the ends of things. I stand in the middle of the kitchen floor. Outside through the glass I can see the backyard. The table. The 4 men. My husband, shoulders back, beer up, already talking again. 12 years. 12 years I've been in this house. And suddenly I am looking at all of it like I'm seeing it for the first time. Before I tell you what happened in the 2 hours that followed, let me tell you who I am. My name is Vanessa Cole. I am 41 years old. Married to Marcus Cole for 12 years. No children, a choice we made in year 3. We have a house, 2 cars, a small shared investment account, and a business that Marcus runs, or believes he runs, called Cole Property Solutions, which manages residential rental properties across 4 zip codes in our metro area. My husband called me worthless in front of his friends after 12 years of marriage 2 hours later. I met Marcus when I was 28. I was working as a financial coordinator for a real estate development firm, clear-headed and organized with a specific talent for reading contracts and finding the places where language that looked fine could eventually become expensive. He was charming in the early years. Everyone said so. What nobody said was that the charm had a direction to it. It ran toward things Marcus wanted. And slowly, quietly, over the 12 years I spent beside him, one of the things Marcus wanted was to be the only person in the room who mattered. He got very good at making that feel like love. It didn't begin with cruelty. I want to say that clearly, because the honest version of how this happens is not the simple one, not a man who was always mean, not a situation that was obviously bad from the first month. Those versions exist and they are real, but this is not that. What happened with Marcus was a slow accumulation of small adjustments, most of which I made willingly, all of which added up to a version of my life I did not recognize as a trap until I was fully inside it. When I left my job, I told myself it was mutual. We were both busy. Marcus's business was growing and needed attention. I was good with contracts and records, and those things were needed on his side more than at my office. So I left. I told myself I could go back later. I didn't because there was always something on Marcus's side that needed me more. Another property, another lease, another gap in the record keeping that would become a problem if nobody addressed it. I addressed it. Year after year, I addressed it. And year after year, the woman who had been good at her job became the woman who managed her husband's background, invisible, uncompensated, and slowly erased. In the early years, he called me capable. He said it with genuine warmth, I think, or something that felt like it. He would tell his friends that I caught a contract error that saved them $40,000. He would tell his mother that Vanessa understood the numbers better than he did and that he didn't know what he'd do without her. It felt like partnership. I believed it was partnership. The first shift came wrapped in humor. At a dinner party, year 4, someone asked how I managed so much. Marcus laughed and said, "Relax, she'd be lost without me. I'm the one who gives her purpose." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. I remember thinking it was a strange thing to say. But I pushed it down, because the room was comfortable and he was smiling and we were happy, probably, mostly. I didn't know that sentences like that were practice. Not practice for a specific cruelty. But practice in the sense that small jokes that go unchallenged become large beliefs. Practice in the sense that if you say something about another person in front of enough people enough times without them correcting it, it becomes the established truth about them. He was practicing who I was. I let him. For a long time, I genuinely couldn't tell the difference. Year by year, the adjustments accumulated. I stopped attending professional events because his schedule took priority and someone had to stay back. I stopped maintaining the friendships I had before the marriage because those friends felt like they belonged to a version of me that was increasingly hard to access. I stopped thinking of my financial coordination skills as something that had market value, because in the daily reality of our house, they were just things I did. Marcus, in the meantime, was building. He built a business reputation that depended significantly on organizational infrastructure I maintained. A social persona as a self-made operator who figured out property management through sheer intelligence and drive. He built relationships with clients and contacts who respected him, who invited him to events, who asked him for advice. And every time someone praised him, every time someone asked how he did it, Marcus said, drive. Vision, hard work, the right instincts. He didn't say, "My wife reviews every lease before it goes out." He didn't say, "My wife caught the insurance gap on the Morley Street properties that would have cost us $42,000. He didn't say, "My wife tracks maintenance scheduling across 17 units because I stopped doing it 3 years ago." He didn't say any of it. Because by year 8, he had stopped seeing it. I want to be precise about the bookkeeping, because this is important. When I began helping Marcus full-time, the business had 4 properties. Over the years it grew to 23. The administrative complexity grew with it: lease agreements, vendor contracts, insurance renewals, tax filings, compliance documentation. I handled most of this. Not because Marcus asked me to, specifically, he didn't have to. The gap would appear and I would fill it, the way water fills the shape of whatever container it's in. A deadline would approach and I would handle it. A vendor would dispute an invoice and I would negotiate it. A tenant would escalate a complaint and I would resolve it. All of this happened under Marcus's name. His business. His success. But in the actual legal structure of Cole Property Solutions. In the documents established in year 2 when we set the business up together and I reviewed every line of the operating agreement, my role was not invisible. I was listed as a co-owner with 40% interest. I had signing authority on 2 of the business accounts. My name was on the operating agreement. Marcus had never once thought about this since the day he signed it. He built an empire in his mind where he was the sole architect. The paperwork disagreed, and I had kept every copy. The household finances were something he had stopped paying close attention to. Marcus was smart enough, he understood money and leverage. But understanding a principle and maintaining its details are different things. Around year 5, he made the comfortable decision that the details were being handled. They were. I was handling them. What this meant in practice was that I knew things he had long since stopped tracking. I knew that the joint savings account, the one he occasionally referenced in conversation as our rainy day fund, had been supplemented significantly by systematic transfers I managed from household income I tracked carefully and he did not. I knew that the 3 credit cards he believed were carrying modest balances were, because of consistent management I had applied for years, actually in a much better position than he had assumed in his last casual check some time ago. I also knew something else. About 18 months ago, I quietly opened a personal account. Mine alone, and put money in systematically. Not large amounts, just consistent ones. I had told Marcus once in passing. He nodded and asked nothing further. He didn't know what was in it. He hadn't thought to ask. That was his mistake. By the time Marcus said that word in the backyard, something had already shifted in me. Not in the previous 2 hours. Not even in the previous week. This shift had been building like pressure under something brittle, quietly, invisibly, for longer than I had acknowledged to myself. I had been thinking, more and more, about what my life actually looked like. Not the version Marcus performed for his friends. Not the version I'd been presenting at dinner parties. The real version, the one I lived inside alone most of the time. And what I had been noticing, slowly and then all at once, was the gap between what I contributed and what I was acknowledged to contribute. The gap between the woman I had been at 28 and the woman I had allowed myself to become. The gap between the arrangement we had built and the word partnership, which I had been using for it for years even as it stopped matching anything real. I hadn't said any of this to Marcus. I had been trying to figure out whether it was fixable. Whether I was being fair. Whether I had somehow gotten this wrong. Then he sat in the backyard with 4 of his friends and called me worthless. And something I had been holding together very carefully for a very long time came quietly and completely undone. Just finally, standing in the kitchen, I go through what I know. This takes me approximately 7 minutes. I am not panicking. The version of this where I spiral or make sobbing phone calls, that is not what happens. Something in me has gone very calm and very clear. I think of the operating agreement in the filing cabinet in the office. I think of my 40% interest. I think of the signing authority on the 2 business accounts. I think of the lease records I have maintained, the maintenance logs I have kept, the vendor contracts I have negotiated and stored in organized folders in both the physical cabinet and the cloud backup I set up 3 years ago because I was worried about a hard drive failure. I think of the personal account and what is in it. I think of the financial advisor we consulted 4 years ago who told us, gently, that Marcus's habit of making decisions without documentation was a liability, and whom Marcus had dismissed as overly cautious, and who had subsequently taken me on as a solo client because I had reached out 6 months later and asked if I could schedule my own consultation. The advisor's name is Petra. Her number is in my phone. I go to the home office. I open the filing cabinet. The files are exactly as I left them. Of course they are. I organized them. This cabinet is one of the most reliable things in my life because I have given it the same consistent care I've given everything else, care that is invisible until the moment it matters. The operating agreement is in a blue folder. The business bank account statements, printed quarterly going back to year 1, are in a red accordion file. I pull it out. The lease documentation for all 23 properties is in a second cabinet, organized by address. I know where everything is without consulting an index because I built the system. I also open my laptop. I log into the cloud backup. Everything is there. Every document I have ever entered. Every record I have maintained. Every email I have sent on behalf of Cole Property Solutions using my business email address, which is, incidentally, registered in my name as an authorized business agent. I spend 20 minutes reviewing, confirming, making sure my memory of what exists matches what actually exists. It does. And then I sit quietly for a moment. Through the wall I can hear laughter from the backyard. Something Marcus said. They are all out there, relaxed, the moment already behind them for everyone except me. I pick up my phone. I call Petra. Petra answers on the second ring. She is the kind of person who sounds alert at odd hours, someone who has developed steadiness from witnessing enough of other people's worst moments. I tell her I need to think out loud. She says go ahead. I walk her through it. Not emotionally, but with the specific clarity that can feel like calm and is really something sharper. The operating agreement, the account access, the documentation, the personal account, the state of the shared finances as I actually understand them. She listens without interrupting. When I finish, she says, "You've been managing this much more carefully than he has." "Yes," I say. "And he doesn't know what you know." "Correct," I say. "Okay," she says, and I can hear her thinking, the particular quality of quiet that means someone is actually considering something rather than filling space. "You don't have to do anything tonight. But here's what I want you to understand. The position you're in is significantly different from the position he thinks you're in. And that difference matters. However you choose to use it or not use it, it matters that you know it exists." I thank her. I hang up. I sit for a moment in the office chair, in the quiet. Then I stand up. I go to the kitchen and I wash my hands at the sink, because they feel like they need washing, the way hands do sometimes when you've been going through papers and you want to feel clean before the next thing. I look at myself in the small mirror by the kitchen window. Same face, same woman, but something behind the face is different. I have spent 12 years being managed into smallness. Not through screaming or violence. Through accommodation. Through the slow erosion of my presence that happens when you keep adjusting your needs to fit someone else's expectations until the adjustments become who you are. I look at myself and I think, you are 41 years old. You have maintained 23 rental properties through records so good that the business would struggle significantly without them. You have a 40% interest in a company that Marcus talks about like it is entirely his. You have a personal account. You have a financial advisor who respects your position. You are not worthless. You have been treated as if you were. That is a very different thing. I take off the apron. I fold it and set it on the counter. And I walk back outside. The backyard looks the same as when I left it. Same table, same chairs, same 4 men arranged around my husband who is mid-conversation about something. One of them is laughing. Weston is pointing at something on his phone. Marcus sees me come through the door. He watches me cross the patio. There is something in his expression that he is working to keep casual, a slight shift, a monitoring quality, the look of someone checking to see what state something is in. He expects tears or anger. I can see the prepared response in his shoulders. Crying gets magnanimity. Anger becomes evidence of his point. I come out neither. I sit down, not in a position of confrontation. I pull a chair to the edge of the table, sit down, and take a small piece of bread from the tray I brought out earlier. I eat it. The conversation has paused slightly. Marcus says, "Everything all right?" with the tone of a man who already knows the answer. "Yes," I say. "I was just thinking." "What things?" I look at him. "Business things," I say. The word business does something to his expression, a small recalibration. Marcus compartmentalizes very cleanly, and the backyard with his friends is not a category he associates with business. Business is the office. Business is his phone calls. Business is the version of himself he presents to clients and contacts. This backyard, these men, this is the version of himself where he is the biggest person in the room and I am the footnote. "We can talk about that later," he says. "Of course," I say. And then I don't say anything else for a moment. Someone picks up the thread of the earlier conversation. Something about a development project one of them has been watching. Marcus's attention moves there, and he starts talking, and the evening reassembles itself into something comfortable for him. I sit and I listen. I listen to Marcus describe a property acquisition strategy that I am familiar with because I helped him develop it by reviewing 3 comparable examples last spring and producing a summary he then delivered, word for word, in a meeting with investors. I listened to him talk about operational efficiency, which means Cole Property Solutions rarely has compliance issues, because I calendar every renewal deadline and cross-reference it against city requirements every quarter. I don't say any of this. I just listen, and I notice. The first thing I say, when I say it, is about the Glenbrook properties. This comes about 40 minutes into my return. The conversation has landed on rental property management, one of Marcus's favorite subjects because 2 of them have been considering rental investments and Marcus loves being the expert in the room. He is explaining how straightforward the compliance side is. I say, gently, actually, the Glenbrook units are in the compliance window right now. He looks at me. The city inspection window, I say. The one that opens October 15th. We need the maintenance documentation submitted before the 30th or the certificates lapse. A pause. I know, he says. He doesn't know. I can see it in the half-second before the response arrives. He was not aware of this deadline, because I track the deadlines and they exist in my calendar and my organized folders and nowhere in whatever version of the business lives in his head. You might want to pull the Briar Street records too, I say, still calm, still conversational. The roof inspection from last year needs to be logged before we renew the insurance. Petra flagged it. Petra, he repeats. My financial advisor, I say. He blinks. He didn't know I had a financial advisor. Or he forgot. He definitely didn't know she had flagged something about our insurance. Weston is watching this quietly. Marcus recovers quickly. It is one of his genuine skills, absorbing a surprise and reframing it into something that doesn't disrupt his standing. He smiles and says something about Vanessa keeping him organized, which is a way of turning what just happened into confirmation of his original thesis. See, she helps. But he runs things. I let him have that. For now. The conversation continues. Someone asks about the business structure. Marcus says it's a sole operation, his company, his decisions. I say, 40-60 actually. Not loudly, just factually. He turns. We set it up as a partnership structure, I say. 40% mine, 60% yours. It's in the operating agreement. There is a silence. Marcus's face does something I don't think he's aware of. A small contraction, like a flinch that doesn't quite reach the surface. That's a formality, he says. From when we started. Formalities are legally binding, I say. Another silence. One of the men, not Weston, one of the others, looks between us with the careful expression of someone who has just realized he is watching a private argument using the language of a business meeting. Marcus takes a slow breath. We should talk about this later, he says again. I agree, I say. But I wanted to make sure the structure was clear. I pick up my glass. The next 20 minutes are the most interesting of the evening. Marcus doesn't say anything directly to me. He doesn't argue in front of his friends, because doing so would require him to either admit that he didn't know basic facts about his own business or to claim that my accurate statements are wrong. Which he would then have to substantiate, which he cannot, because they are accurate. So instead he talks around it. He tells a story about a deal he navigated 3 years ago. He talks about his instincts. He presents himself, as always, as the sole competent force behind everything that carries his name. And I sit quietly. I don't correct anything. I don't need to. The 2 things I've already said, the compliance deadlines, the 40%, are already in the room. They are already doing something. I can see it in the way Weston is sitting differently now, in the way the youngest one stopped smiling when Marcus said sole operation, in the way one of them asked me, directly, a question about the property management side about 10 minutes ago. A question that Marcus started to answer and that I answered better, with more specificity, and with a clarity that the questioner acknowledged by nodding and following up with me rather than with Marcus. The room is shifting, not loudly, but the shift is real. Marcus excuses himself to get another beer. He goes inside through the back door, the same kitchen where I stood for 7 minutes building a picture of what I knew. He is inside for longer than it takes to get a beer. I know what he is doing. He is checking his phone. He is trying to access the information he needs to feel more certain, to re-establish the ground under his feet. He might be looking for the operating agreement. He might be looking at the business accounts. He might be looking at the calendar for compliance deadlines. None of that information is as organized as what I have. He comes back out after about 4 minutes. He sits down. He looks at me for a moment, and the look is different from any look I've seen from him in a long time. It is not the smirk from earlier. It is not the bored magnanimity he prepared for tears. It is something he didn't prepare for at all, a look that contains, underneath everything else, the beginning of a reassessment. He says, quietly, we should talk tonight. Yes, I say. We should. About the business, he says. Among other things, I say. He nods, and doesn't say anything else. The 4 men around us are noticeably quieter than they were an hour ago. The evening winds down the way evenings do when something invisible has shifted the atmosphere. Nobody names it, nobody revisits the earlier comment. But something has changed in the temperature of the backyard, and everyone feels it, and everyone is responding to it by doing what people do when they sense they have been watching a situation they misread. They recalibrate, quietly, without acknowledging they're doing it. Weston says good night first. He shakes Marcus's hand, then turns to me and says, "It was good to see you, Vanessa," with a deliberate warmth that I notice and accept without making anything of it. The others leave in ones and twos. Polite, slightly careful. The youngest one pauses by me for a moment and says something about the food being really good. I thank him. The backyard empties. I stand there after the last car has left, with the table still full of dishes and the citronella candle burning down on its stand and the evening air cooling around me. Marcus is across the table, not looking at me. He is sitting in the chair he has been sitting in all night, but the chair feels different now. The ease is gone out of it. He is sitting in a fact and the fact is not comfortable. I begin to clear the table. He helps. That is unexpected. He picks up plates without being asked, carries glasses to the kitchen, makes the kind of quiet, collaborative effort he rarely makes unless something has recalibrated his sense of what the moment requires. We clean up mostly in silence. At some point he says, "The 40% thing." Yes, I say. That was just the startup structure. It was the operating agreement, I say. Which is the legal document that governs the business. He is quiet for a moment. And the financial advisor. Petra, I say. She's been managing my personal accounts for about 2 years. You have personal accounts. 1. I mentioned it when I opened it. You didn't ask any questions. He absorbs this. The compliance deadlines, he says. In my calendar, I say. Everything is organized. I can walk you through the system whenever you want. He doesn't say anything for a long moment. Then he says, "I didn't mean it the way it sounded." I look at him. What I said, he says. Earlier. About worthless. I hold his gaze for a moment. Long enough for him to feel the weight of it. I know what you meant, I say. And I do. He meant exactly what he said. But what he didn't understand was who he was saying it to. That is the part that is going to matter. I don't sleep well that night. Not only because I'm upset. Because there are things running through my mind with the kind of focused energy that makes sleep feel beside the point. A long overdue accounting of what I want my life to look like, now that I've stopped pretending the current version is working. Marcus falls asleep quickly. He does this easily, always has, the ability to turn off and rest regardless of what's unresolved. I used to find it admirable. Now I find it information. I lie there thinking about Petra's voice. You've been managing this much more carefully than he has. I think about the 40%. I think about the filing cabinet with its organized folders. I think about the woman I was at 28, who read contracts and understood numbers, and who became over 12 years a woman handed an apron and told she was lucky to have a purpose. I think about the backyard. The smirk. The word. And I decide something. Not dramatically. Just lying in the dark beside the man who underestimated me, and feeling something settle into place with the quiet certainty of something that has been true for a while and has finally been acknowledged. I know what comes next. 2 days later I sit across from Petra in her office. She has pulled up everything, the accounts, the business documentation, the operating agreement, the comparative valuation of a 40% interest in a 23-property business. She talks me through my options. Not dramatically. As someone doing the job of telling a client what they actually have, what their position is, and what decisions are available to them. By the time I leave her office, I have a plan. Not a revenge plan. A clear-eyed assessment of a situation I have been living inside without fully seeing, and a set of steps toward a future that doesn't require his permission or his definition of my worth. Marcus called me worthless in front of 4 witnesses. What he revealed was how little he had been paying attention, to the business he thought was only his, to the woman he thought he had made small, to the years of work he thought he had erased. You cannot erase what is in a filing cabinet, signed and dated and legally binding. You cannot erase the woman who built it. You can only finally, for the first time, stop giving her a reason to stay quiet. He stopped. I'm not quiet anymore.